Greetings, class. Change Management MBA 6113 class. We have completed 5 modules of the textbook, The Theory and Practice of Change Management by John Hayes. Now we are officially entering into module 6, implementing change and reviewing the progress. So this is a very core section of the whole change management journey. And in the previous key milestones of the journey, we explored how to prepare for change, how to analyze the external environment, how to define a vision, how to build a commitment, and how to build the plan effectively. We looked at several kinds of theories and different frameworks, different practices, different aspects of the change. And this module is a short module, but a very key module to understand planning is only half the battle, and the heart of the change journey resides within the implementation. Implementation alone is not enough. You have to continuously review and make sure the change that you implemented is progressing based on what you have established as a tracking milestones or KPIs or key performance indicators. Now, we all know that even the best strategy can fail if it is not implemented well. And even well-implemented plans can fall short if we don't stop to ask, is it working? Is it creating the change we intended? So this applies not only in the corporate life or your startup world, or even in personal life. I was having a recent discussion with one of my friends. He was guiding his mentees on a particular aspect of establishing some of the core life skills by which they can establish or by which they can go through the life much more easily. And he guided them. They didn't take the initiative to do it. He guided them again. They still didn't take the initiative to do it. And then he backed off. Reflecting on everything we were discussing, I was able to position myself and change his thought process. Guiding them is only like a small step of the way, but inspiring them to follow what you want them to follow, and also assessing whether they followed it, and to ensure that they have completed their journey and they have reaped the benefit of that journey or of those activities, would probably close the aspect of the change management principles that we can impart on others. So very similar to the corporate world, we have to babysit all of the changes that we are instituting in our personal life, in our family life, in inspiring and guiding and mentoring other people, as well as showcasing your life as a roadmap for others to follow. So module 6 is structured around 2 essential themes. Chapter 23 deals with implementing the change, where we would examine how the change unfolds in real organizations, what can go wrong, and how to manage the people or human side of delivery or execution. Chapter 24 focuses in reviewing and keeping the change on track, where we would learn how to monitor the progress, validate the assumptions, and how do we do the course correction using the feedback and the performance metrics. We will also explore some of the real world examples, like KeyChemicals acquiring the EcoPure to bring some of the theories into practice. So whether you are leading change now or preparing for the future, this module will equip you with the tools to execute strategically, adapt intelligently, and ensure that the change sticks. Change will result in what the intended outcome before we stay away or before we deviate from the monitoring side of the house. It's extremely critical to stay the course and making sure that the change has completely fulfilled its objectives before you take the pedal off. So before we dive into the chapter 23, let's take a look what we would gain from this module. So by the end of this module, you will be able to understand the key issues that need to be addressed for successful implementation. So implementation, or when we think about implementation, it isn't just about following a plan or a set of actions. It is all about navigating the complexities that arise in the real world settings. So change management thus becomes a real living body of knowledge where you're continuously learning from different people, processes, technologies, challenges and roadblocks, corporate objectives to make sure that you can navigate this successfully. Then you will learn, explain why implementation is often a multi-step process. So the core principle you are going to leave from this lecture is that change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in distinct phases. It improves as we learn more from the organization or the subjects of the change or the processes that has been subjected for change. And it also unfolds and adapt and refine along this way. So this is purely a journey by which you can bring this true change into an organization, into a large enterprise, for an industry, for a group of connected industries, or at a larger governmental or public level. The larger the body, the tougher and the longer the change management is going to be. So then you would learn how to recognize the diagnosis and planning that influences the outcomes. So the groundwork that you lay in the early stages of change, it directly impacts your ability to implement successfully. Then we would discuss how do we facilitate the implementation using the power of our communication. So communication, many people would think that it's just about informing them what we want to achieve. Rather, it is about engaging, it is about clarifying, it's about inspiring and motivating your stakeholders through the change process on a continuous fashion. So there are some entities, some departments, some organizations with high performing, high talent team who would probably understand the change and embark on this journey the moment you share the first sentence of the change. But there are others who would need constant inspiration and motivation until they see the light at the end of the tunnel. So, as a change manager, as a change leader, you should be prepared for this continuous communication, continuous feedback loop, going through all of these different phases, engaging and clarifying and bringing use cases and success stories of the different changes or of the different activities along this journey of the change management. Then we would learn how to manage stakeholders and how would we promote alignment when it comes to the change strategies and change themes. So you will learn how to identify key influencers. You would learn how to anticipate resistance. How do you ensure people are moving in the same direction? And finally, you will be able to adopt responsible management practices that not only drive the performance, but also protect the well-being of those affected by the change. So these objectives will guide our learning as we explore the practical and human sides of implementing and sustaining the changes. So let's take a moment to talk about one of the most important mindset shift in change management. As we discussed, once we ingrain the philosophy that implementing change is not an one-off activity, it becomes part and parcel of the job responsibility, shepherding every step of the way until it happens. In theory, we often imagine that implementation as a clear linear process. In practice, it's anything but a linear process. So let's embody the three key principles or core areas of change management or implementing the change management. First, understanding that it's iterative. It is deeply intertwined with planning and diagnosis. So imagine a hospital rolling out a new patient scheduling system. So initially, the team plans for a faster appointment booking, lower wait time, efficient use of clinical and non-clinical time. But as they begin the implementation, they realize that the real bottleneck might be physician availability, not the technology that needed to book the appointment. And that realization would prompt a reevaluation of staffing patterns, scheduling policies, physician preferences, their activities, and it would even uncover other areas that might need changes. So now implementation has merged with the re-diagnosis and planning must adapt. So reflecting back on my personal story, why did the mentee did not follow my friend's advices and guidance? There might be other areas that my friend should explore and understand, even though the mentee acknowledges the mentee has the need to implement the changes that my friend is suggesting, there might be some other factors that are lowering the potential of the mentee. So discovering those resistances, those hindrances, those roadblocks would effectively position my friend as a change leader. So this class, with each and every one of you as change leaders, should not read the book by the cover, should develop this mindset of diagnosis and planning, and then followed by implementing, taking different steps. As someone said, doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result is not practical. So second, you need to understand that you need to adjust and adapt as often as it is needed based on the insights, based on the new facts, based on the new learnings that you have uncovered during this process. So change management has to be conscious, meaning you are purposeful in bringing out the changes that you want to see to others, to your department, to processes, to your division, to the organization that you're working on. Let's take an example of a university introducing a hybrid learning model. So our curriculum is a hybrid learning model. There is class that's happening in the classroom, and there are classes that is happening as a remote. So they would probably start with a 50% in person and 50% online. But after 2 months, the student engagement data shows that the recorded lectures might be underutilized while the live online sessions are popular. So the administration then should pivot to increase the live interactions and reduce the asynchronous content. I would like to hear from you, from all of you, to see how effective these video lectures are. The intent behind the video lectures, you have the option to revisit the content of the lecture again and again and again. You would also be able to listen to examples other than the textbook, which are practical and real-time happening in the industry. And you have the opportunity to connect and ask questions, thoughts, and any other ideas that you might have as we go through this journey. So the third key aspect that we should keep in mind while realizing that implementation is not a one-side, or it's not like a sidekick activity, is to understand that the initial efforts may require revisiting the original goals, plans, and activities. In many instances, this is also called as pivot. Pivot happens when you realize that the data post-implementation, while going through the diagnosis and planning, is pointing you towards yet another symptoms or yet another causative factors that might also need to be planned as part of this change journey. So let's take an example. Let's say a technology company launches an internal innovation program to boost the employee creativity. So they set a goal to collect 100 ideas in 3 months. I'm just making it up. But halfway through the process, they discover that employees aren't contributing. Not because they lack ideas, but because they are unsure how submissions will be evaluated. The leadership team realizes the goal that it is not about collecting ideas. It's about building the team activities, building the concept of psychological safety, bringing more clarity into the program. And so they would revisit the program structure. They can reset the expectations and restart the campaign with a new messaging and support mechanisms. So the theme underlying this, the key takeaway from this discussion is the change management, meaning everything that doesn't change is change. So change is part of our life activities. So everything that we do, we have to be conscious about that it is not a one-off activity. It requires constant diagnosis, constant change or adaptations of goals, plans, and constant feedback loop in learning why our change is not resulting in the outcome that we are expecting to realize. So now let's take a look at an example, a real case study. when KeyChemicals acquired the company EcoPure. So this case study is featured in chapter 23. It provides a real world context for understanding how the implementation unfolds, not in theory, but in practice. So let's take a look at the background of KeyChemicals. So KeyChemicals is a multinational organization specializing in industrial and specialty chemicals. So as many companies, when they get mature, the possibility by which the growth and innovation and the market share will slow down. So similarly, KeyChemicals also faced that slowdown, and it has the pressure that it needs to grow, it needs to innovate. The market is becoming competitive. And they also realize that the agility and the technical expertise may become the key differentiation factors. So EcoPure, on the other hand, is a smaller but a rapidly growing company known for their technical talent and environmentally focused product lines. So for KeyChemicals, EcoPure represented a strategic opportunity which might bring out new markets, novel products, and a strong innovation pipeline. So this is the case for any mature company, not only just in the chemical industry, but so many other companies go through the same strategy when they achieve their initial goals and objectives. And when the market becomes mature, they will all go through this stagnation phase, and they would be desperate to innovate and find new attractive pastures. So the real story lies in how this acquisition was implemented and what that reveals about change management. The fact that they wanted to acquire, they realized the growth stagnation is standard across the board. They identified EcoPure. They wanted to make sure that they bring them on fold, and how do we go through the phases by which it can be effectively implemented. So step one is you got triggered by the recognition of opportunity. The KeyChemicals identified EcoPure as a high value target through their market research, strategic planning, and other sources, business intelligence sources. So the strategic objectives were very clear. You need to enter into a new geographic market. You need to diversify the product portfolio. You need to acquire special capabilities in probably an eco-friendly manner because they're a key chemical company. So the opportunity is valid, it's promising, but as change leaders, we know that recognizing the opportunity is only step one. The success lies in what happens next. So then they went through the due diligence and the phased integration process. So KeyChemicals CEO assembled a cross-functional team, and they're tasked with financial evaluation. And their role was to assess the compatibility across organization culture, management capabilities, IT infrastructure, organization alignment, identifying unique business process, duplicative business process. How do we differentiate all of the different things which a typical CEO or a C-level leader would go through when you are into a M&A or merger and acquisition strategy or implementation phase. So KeyChemicals learned from the past engagements like this, where a siloed evaluation always led to integration disasters. So here in this case, they took a phased approach to the process. So what does this tell us? So the due diligence is not just about technical or legal or financial or an outcome oriented. It's about understanding the cultural fit, behavioral fit, operational fit, and strategic. And rather than implementing all the changes at once, maybe they learned this lesson in their previous engagements like this, they staggered the integration, allowing the teams to adapt, build their confidence, build their relationships, build their uh, strategies, and they also allow the team to react and realign their assumptions based on their initial feedback. So now comes the third step, perhaps probably the most important insight from this case is that the people side of change was managed with intent. There is a well-documented incident where poor communication during a prior acquisition caused a mass exodus of key talent. So the leadership at KeyChemicals learned this lesson the hard way. So when it came to the EcoPure, they approached the communication very carefully. The key team members received confidential briefings before the official announcement. Managers were coached on how to discuss the change with empathy. They anticipated psychological responses like confusion, anxiety, resistance, and built their timeline accordingly. So this company didn't treat this change as a top-down order, but they treated as empathetic exchange of information or dialogue by which this can be brought to a success. So in this case, this gives us a very clear, structured view of implementation that touches all the core aspects of Chapter 23. It began with strategic diagnosis. It was implemented in multiple steps. It required alignment between planning and execution. It also recognized the human dynamics, not just the business logic, that should be proactively managed. It also illustrates how change efforts are dynamic, which requires flexibility, feedback loops, and willingness to revisit assumptions when needed. So some of the key takeaways from this practice is considering implementation as a learning process. It's not a checklist, and it is a cycle, it is a journey where you learn a lot. Most of the leaders before the change and after the change looks completely different. If a leader has not changed with the change, the leader has not learned much. It's a good idea when you are invited as a change leader or as a project manager or as a project leader going through a technology implementation, process restructuring, or implementing new policies. It's always a good idea to take a checklist of you as a person before the change, and you allow yourself to go through the lessons and journey through the change, and then you go back and revisit everything you documented before the change. You will see that you have considerably changed when you got this unique opportunity to go through the change management. Then we also learn prioritizing the communication early and often, because silence always creates fear and clarity always builds trust. Then we need to know that engaging stakeholders at all levels. There is no guarantee that your change agenda will be bought in by the organization. It's always earned through respect and involvement. And use phased integration so that you can manage risk. You should build a mechanism for reflection. What you plan won't always work as you expected it. It's not a failure. It is an adaptation towards your next plan. So the KeyChemicals EcoPure story is not just a case about a business deal. It is a story about leadership maturity, how a company learned from its past, how it took implementation seriously, how it treated people as foundation of success. And as future change leaders, let's remember the true measure of implementation success isn't just what gets done, but how it is experienced by those who are impacted. I shared my story about the startup that I am leading, and it is completely filled with changes after changes after changes and pivoting, understanding the product market fit, listening acutely from our stakeholders, listening from the team who is working diligently behind this, and then constantly asking the question, what optimization can I bring in to the journey so that we can get the necessary outcome that we are intending um, to happen. So whether it is personal, whether it is your startup, whether it is your company, whether it's your family, whether it's your organization, whether it's a nonprofit that you're involved in, whether it is group of friends coming together and doing a hobby, all of this would require the principles that we are discussing today in this chapter. So now let's take a look at how do we manage people issues in implementation. So when we talk about implementation, it's always tempting to focus on strategy, on systems or timeline, project plans, milestones, action items, risk plans, all of those things. But if there is one lesson that shows up time and time and time again in change management, is especially during implementation, people issues are not a soft side of change. They are the hard edge of implementation. Why? Today, at least, people make the change happen. Tomorrow, this might not be true when your organization is run by AIs and avatars and robots, and majority of them would understand the side of the change management and they would implement it in microseconds. But as long as people are managing your process, your technology, your systems, your roadmaps, your competitive advantage, business intelligence, strategic planning, always think that people comes first whenever we talk about change management. So poor communication causes anxiety and resistance. One of the most common mistakes in implementation is assuming that people will understand or support the change because it has been planned well. In reality, uncertainty breeds fear, and fear leads to resistance. Even the people who are reporting directly to you, even you have talked about the change that is coming down the pipe, even they were part of planning processes, it has to be a constant proactive effort, letting them know regarding everything that you know about the change, so that there is a constant communication, building that faith, building the trust, building their courage so that they can move through this journey as peaceful as they can. So in the KeyChemicals and EcoPure case, the dynamics was clear. When employees in the company, when they acquired, they were informed early, they feared the layoffs, relocations, loss of influence, rumors always filled the silence that often led the valuable employees leaving before the integration even began. So the key lesson is silence creates the space for speculation, People need clarity, not perfection. Even partial information shared openly and honestly is better than not communicating with them at all. So the powerful learnings from the case study should communicate to us how we need to implement change in our organization. So when communicating during implementation, what you say is only half the equation. When and how you say it is just as important. So coordinating the messaging and the timing carefully is critical. Consider the moment when a change is announced. If one department hears it before another, or worse, if they hear it through informal channels, trust break down immediately. Conflicting messages can also create confusion about priorities or expectations. So that's why successful implementation includes pre-announcement briefings for key influencers, internal alignment on messaging, a clear cadence of communication, and format of communication. So think of implementation as a choreographed script or a rollout. It's not just a memo or a policy that has been socialized in your organization. So the third key point, last but not least, is to provide the socio-emotional support to reduce the uncertainty. In all of my experiences, this aspect of change is often overlooked. But we realize, and we always say that in hindsight, this is probably the most impactful element. When people experience change, they don't just process it rationally, they feel it. There is real emotional play in it. Psychological reactions would surface like denial, anger, fear, loss of identity are very common, especially if the change involves job roles, reporting lines, drastic changes, cultural shifts, all of those things. Socioeconomical support can include regular check-in. The managers are regularly checking in with employees 101, accepting, addressing, and discussing their concerns. The visible support from leadership, any opportunity that anybody get for a dialogue, not just providing the instructions, implementing peer support or focus groups or change champions to model openness. As John Hayes explains, organizations that acknowledge emotion and act with empathy earn the credibility and commitment and can keep it running on a long-term basis. So managing people during implementation isn't just about softening the blow of change. It's about creating the conditions for success. People who feel safe, informed, and respected are far more likely to support change and far less likely to sabotage or resist the change. So as you plan your next implementation, ask yourself, who needs to hear this message first? How will we maintain the trust and transparency? And how are we showing people that their experience, their knowledge, their longevity in the company matters? Because at the end of the day, change happens through people, not around them or behind them or in front of them. So this is probably the foundational aspect, but it is subtle. It's a powerful tension that happens in implementation. The pressure to deliver quick wins and how it impacts trust within the organization. It's natural for senior leaders and stakeholders to want fast results, especially after a merger, reorganization, strategic shift. Executives often want to prove the success of the change. But this pressure, if not handled with care, can erode trust and backfire. So let's take a look at the three critical reminders for maintaining trust while navigating the early performance demands. Number one, avoid any type of heavy-handed management styles. So in times of change, especially when an M&A happens, sometimes responding to pressure with control, they might tighten the decision making, push for quick returns, or override the local cultural factors or team norms in order to drive the outcome. But as Jemison and Sitkin in 1986 noted that their research on post-merger integration, this often leads to parent firm arrogance, quote unquote, parent firm arrogance. Because employees may feel because we acquired you, we know better. Or worse, you're lucky to be here. This creates defensiveness, this reduces the morale, and pushes out the key talent. Instead, effective leaders uses facilitative styles. They set clear goals, but invite the local input. They manage outcomes, but not micromanaging people. The next key aspect to keep in mind is to communicate fairly and transparently. When quick wins are the focus, communication often becomes transactional. What is done? What is next? Who is accountable? But people need more than instruction. They need context. They need fairness. Transparent communication, or when you communicate transparently, you should ask some of the questions, like why certain metrics matter, what success would look like beyond quantifiable, objectively expressed in numbers, and how individuals can contribute without being blindsided. So fairness doesn't mean that everyone has to agree to the plan. It means people understand the reasoning and feel respected in the process. So in your previous case study, the Echo Pure, employees feared layoffs after the acquisition. When they were included in the initial planning conversations, the trust eroded. Once KeyChemicals began sharing more openly about timelines, expectations, and goals, the anxiety declined and the engagement improved. So the last area in the pressure to deliver quick wins and to maintain and manage the trust, respect the acquired team's identity and capabilities. In the rush to implement changes and drive performance, it's very easy to forget that the acquired team comes with a history, comes with values, comes with strength of their own. Treating them as blank slates or units to be integrated sends a harmful message. It sends the message that we are here to fix you. It's not saying when you communicate We are here to grow together. Change managers or change leaders should acknowledge what made the acquired team successful, which practices should be preserved, and how to align systems without erasing the identity. And this is what John Hayes called building a socio emotional support, giving people space to feel secure and valued even as they adapt. So, the key insight here is quick wins are important, but not at the cost of long term commitment. Trust takes time to build, and it only takes very few seconds to lose. So, if you are in a position of leading change, deliver value quickly, lead with empathy, share your reasoning, and never underestimate the power of dignity in transition. So, this is a very foundational chapter to understand all of the core aspects that would go wrong when you are implementing a change. It's a very easy to read, commonsensical, filled with case studies and experiences, which will guide you not only in your professional life, but also in your personal life. Now let's take a look at the next chapter. Yes, we implemented the change. Is our work really done? And John Hayes reminds us implementing the change is only second step, but you need to constantly review and understand and monitor that the change is on track. So at this stage in the change process, to summarize, we have already diagnosed the need. We designed all the interventions. We implemented the plan. But as I said, implementation is only half the story. The real challenge lies in monitoring the progress, listening intently from the feedback coming from the changed organizations, processes, technologies, customers, entities, the ecosystem, everything, right? And once you listen, you will be able to make the necessary course corrections. So think of this as like running a race. You don't just start strong, but you pace, you adapt, and you push through to the finish line. Similarly, successful change leaders must continually review how the change is unfolding. Check if interventions are working and stay alert to the signs of misalignment. So in this chapter, we will explore 6 core learning outcomes. First, how to monitor implementation and adjust your efforts to ensure outcomes are achieved. Second, we will revisit the concept of cause and effect hypothesis, understanding how these assumptions shape your change plan. Then we will learn to identify the key information needed to assess the progress. We will look at tools that can help monitor the change, such as balance, scorecard, waves, feedback model, and others. We will also examine when and how to revise assumptions or update the plan. Finally, we'll see how the reviewers play a strategic role in maintaining the momentum and refining the interventions. So reviewing oftentimes is a confusing word. It just tells us, oh, that I need to measure, I need to report, I need to see all of these KPIs, KPMs and everything. No. Reviewing means it's about learning, adapting, and ensuring that the change is the brought out change is sticking through the life cycle. Okay, so let's now dive into chapter 24 and explore what it takes to keep the transformation on task. So, as we move into the implementation stage of the change, it's important to recognize that there isn't a one size fits all approach. In fact, there are two dominant models that guides how the implementation unfolds: the blueprint approach and the emergent approach. So let's start with the blueprint approach. This is what many people think of as a classic method. You create a comprehensive, detailed plan outlining the specific steps, timelines, and responsibilities. It is grounded in the belief that if we plan thoroughly enough, execution should be straightforward. For example, imagine a hospital rolling out a new electronic medical record system. In a blueprint style implementation, leadership would define milestones, dates for key activities, software implementation, software QA, staff training, allocating budgets, and map pretty much even workflows before anything is rolled out. The success of this model hinges on assumptions like believing that staff will adopt the new system as expected, or that there won't be disruption to daily operations. The downside is these assumptions often go unchallenged. If something unexpected happens, so let's say a clinical department refuses to abandon their paper workflows, immediately the blueprint plan can fall apart quickly. On the other hand, the emergent approach accepts that change is messy and that not all variables can be predicted in advance. Here, implementation becomes iterative, meaning you take a step, you evaluate what happens, and then adjust accordingly. It's rooted in feedback loops and double loop learning, where even core assumptions can be questioned and revised. Let's take a look at the EMR example or the electronic medical record example, how it will be different with an emergent approach. So when we are thinking from an emergent perspective, leadership might start this with a pilot program in one department. They would gather the feedback. Maybe nurses found the interface too complex, or physicians are overworking or duplicating the work. The team then adjusts the training materials and the system features before expanding the rollout. Here, they are learning and evolving in real time, building a set of successful customers who are happy about the change and they realize the value that the new EMR is bringing into their life, rather than just rigidly following a fixed plan. So each approach has got its own place. The blueprint works well in a very stable environment with predictable outcomes. So, for example, construction or a regulatory compliance or even IT upgrades or application upgrades will all follow blueprint. The emergent model might be better suited to a complex institution-wide people-driven changes like cultural transformation, a new leader taking over a department, a digital innovation, or an organizational restructure where uncertainty is high. So as you manage implementation, consider this question. Are you in a context that rewards rigid planning, or do you need flexibility, feedback, and learning to succeed. Your answer will shape not only the strategy, but even it helps your mindset and leadership style throughout the change process. Now let's take a look at monitoring the change plan. Monitoring a change plan is more than just saying that, yes, I achieved the milestone. It is all about testing our assumptions and continuously learning whether our efforts are actually creating the impact we hoped for. So let's begin with the core principle. All change plans are built on a set of cause and effect hypotheses. This means when we introduce a new policy, or when we restructure a department or adopt a new technology, we are assuming that these interventions will lead to a specific outcome, like improved productivity. We will have a higher employee satisfaction, or a faster service delivery, or gain more market share, or attract more customers, so on and so forth. So if a retail company rolls out a customer loyalty app, the cost might be if we provide instant rewards, customers will engage more frequently. The effect is what we are aiming for, which is the increased purchase frequency and building that long-term loyalty with the customers. But here is where monitoring plays a critical role. We must track how this hypothesis plays out in the real world. Is engagement actually increasing? Are customers using the app consistently? Are sales rising as expected? Through monitoring, we would be able to validate or revise our assumptions. Perhaps we find that usage is high, but only among one geography. For example, let's say Gen Z. In that case, our assumption that all customers will respond to digital rewards needs optimization. Maybe older customers prefer printed coupons or in-person interactions. And this new insight can lead to a marketing strategy, like launching a dual channel program. So that brings us to the core point. Performance drivers would signal whether desired outcomes are being achieved or not. So think of these performance drivers as indicators which would tell us whether we are on track. So these drivers can be employee engagement scores, system adoption rates, customer wait times, usages, cost per unit metrics. All of these serves as early warning signs. So let's take a look at hospital trying to reduce readmission, which is a problem that I am facing. The performance driver might be the post-discharge follow-up calls. If these calls are happening consistently and patients are reporting clarity on care instructions, then the driver is strong and we are more likely to achieve the outcome of a reduced readmissions. If not, we need to ask, is the problem in execution? Something wrong with training? Why is patient not responsive? In essence, monitoring gives us the feedback we need to adjust the course before small issues can become major setbacks. It's a form of active listening to what the organization, data, and people are telling us. So to summarize, change plans are built on hypotheses. Monitoring helps us to test these hypotheses. And performance drivers gives us clues about whether we are headed in the right direction or do we need to pivot. So this is how we ensure that change stays aligned with purpose, measurable in progress, and adaptable in execution. So now let's take a look at some of the key review questions. I'm hoping that you read the questions. So once a change plan is in motion, we can't assume that everything will unfold smoothly. That's where the structured review becomes essential. Let's take a look at 4 key questions. Are interventions being implemented as intended? You would all agree that this question is foundational. So before we can evaluate the outcome, we need to ensure that the plan is actually being executed as designed. For example, suppose an organization introduced a new mentorship program to onboard junior employees. If only a third of department actually assigned mentors, we are not in a position to evaluate whether the program works. We are dealing with a breakdown in implementation. So here, audits, spot checks, and real-time tracking tools can help uncover these gaps early. Another example, if JivaCare, the startup that I am actively working on, if the intent is to reduce the readmission, but if only like one department who might not have a high readmission score or readmission metric implements this, there is an implementation breakdown. So the first foundational question that we need to ask is, did the implementation work as planned before you can look at the outcome? The second question is, are interventions producing the desired impact? So now that we know the mentorship program is implemented, JivaCare has been rolled out, so the plan is in place. The next question is whether it is working. Are we seeing the impact we predicted? So the third example, let's say a school district adopted a new reading curriculum. So it was implemented in all classrooms, but even after 6 months, the test scores haven't improved. So that prompts us to ask, is the curriculum suitable for the student demographic? Are teachers receiving enough training? Are we measuring the right indicators of success? It is important to remember implementation always does not guarantee the effectiveness. So even well-executed plans can fall short if our hypothesis or assumption is off. The third question is the change plan still valid? So this, I would say, it's a strategic question. There is a lot of conditions that change, market shift, technologies emerge, new policies come into action. So a change plan that was valid 6 months ago may not be relevant today. Think about how many businesses had to revisit their digital strategies, especially during pandemic. Plans centered around in-person experiences had to pivot fast, sometimes completely. Many businesses went through like a shutdown because they were all in-person transactions or exchanges. So by asking if the plan is still valid, we protect ourselves from blind execution and ensure that our strategy remains aligned with current realities. Number 4, the last one here, what kind of feedback loops that we need to adapt? Feedback loops can be either formal, like survey and dashboard, or it can be informal, like check-ins and town halls, or how organizations stay agile. If the employees are hesitant to share feedback, or if data is siloed, we won't have the insight needed to steer the change process. We need to build a culture and infrastructure where the feedback is continuous and actionable. This is also where the double loop learning comes into play, not just adjusting actions, but rethinking assumptions and goals when feedback tells something is off. So these 4 questions provides a compass for navigating change. They help leaders move from assumptions to awareness, from rigidity to responsiveness. By making them part of your regular review process, you ensure that change isn't just launched, it is sustained, improved, and aligned with the bigger picture. So let's keep these questions close as we move into our next section on how different tools like balanced scorecard support this kind of adaptive learning. So as we near the end of this module 6 on implementation and keeping change on track, let's take a moment to talk about something equally important. How do we review the performance of our ventures? So implementing a plan is just the beginning. Sustaining and scaling the plan, especially new ventures or change initiatives, requires a continuous feedback process. In this section, we explore 2 crucial types of feedback: the strategic feedback and operational feedback, and how they shape our decisions moving forward. So strategic feedback, it's aligned with the customer needs. It gives us insight into the big picture, whether our business model still resonates with what customer actually want. For example, a health tech startup might roll out a digital wellness app, assuming that users prioritize scheduling the doctor's visit. But customer feedback might show that they value mental health journey or mindfulness reminders more. That disconnect is strategic. It's not just about tweaking the features, it's about questioning whether your value proposition truly aligns with market demand. And without this kind of feedback, we risk investing heavily in solutions that nobody prefers. Optional feedback identifies delivery or issues surrounding any type of processes, not optional operational feedback. Because delivery or process is completely connected to the operational engine of an organization. It is all about how we deliver. Imagine the online grocery venture. Strategically, the model is sound, there is a demand, but users complain that deliveries arrive late or there are missing items, which means there is a gap in execution. Here, performance issues may not require rethinking the core model, but only require process improvement. How do we streamline the supply chain? How do we enhance the driver logistics? How will we bring the customer experience as a primary priority? So this kind of feedback help us fine-tune our operations to meet expectations consistently. So use feedback to revise the business models and execution. So we saw few examples. The real power comes when we use both kinds of feedback, the strategic feedback and the operational feedback together. The strategic feedback tells us to shift the direction, and the operational feedback tells us how to get there faster and smoother. So in fact, many successful startups and change initiatives undergo what is called as a pivot. Pivot is nothing but a shift in direction informed by this kind of learning. We discussed about Netflix. Netflix pivoted from DVD rentals to streaming. Or another company, Slack. Slack actually came out of a failed gaming company and became successful in the industry. So feedback doesn't just measure the success, it drives it. It keeps us agile, it keeps us responsive, and it keeps us relevant. So whether you are leading a new venture or managing a change effort in an established organization, reviewing performance through strategic and operational feedback loop is non-negotiable. It ensures that your solutions stay aligned, your execution stays sharp, and your team keeps learning. So now let's discuss how these feedback loops are embedded into tools like Balanced Scorecard and change management indicators. So as we continue exploring how to review and monitor change, one of the most effective toolkit that every change manager should have is the Balanced Scorecard. It's developed by Kaplan and Norton. Why is it so valuable? Because Balanced Scorecard takes a holistic view of performance. It doesn't focus just on financial. In many cases, financials lag behind the actual performance. The Balanced Scorecard introduces 4 key measures that reflect and provides a complete picture of how an organization is doing. Number 1, financial. So these are traditional metrics like return on investments, cash flow, and revenue growth. They show whether your strategy is improving the bottom line. Number 2, customer. How satisfied are your customers? Are you acquiring new ones and retaining the existing ones? This measure reflects whether you are delivering value in the eyes of your users. Number 3, internal process. These metrics evaluate how efficiently internal operations are running. Are your processes aligned to deliver your value proposition? Number 4, innovation and learning. This forward-looking lens assesses whether the organization is improving, adapting, and staying competitive. It includes staff training, it includes culture, it includes the ability to innovate, it includes the latest and greatest skills and the talent that the staff brings to the table. So then we talk about how does the power of the Balanced Scorecard lies in connecting performance drivers to strategic outcomes, the link. So if your goal is to become a market leader in a service, you might track the internal process metrics like customer resolution time, success rate of the resolution of the calls, not just revenue. There are so many other parameters of the service that you need to measure to make sure that you are a market leader. So as we discussed, here is where the cause and effect chain happens. Improved training or learning leads to better process. Improved process increases the customer satisfaction. Increased customer satisfaction ultimately boosts the financial returns. And increased financial returns helps you build the market share. So this interconnection ensures that everyone from frontline teams to executives can see how their actions contribute to the bigger picture. Last, in this Balanced Scorecard approach, which is probably the most important, this acts as a shared language. It aligns department, it breaks down silos, it ensures that all teams are working towards the same strategic goals. So let's assume if a hospital wants to improve the patient outcomes, With a balanced scorecard, the finance team ensures budget is allocated to key programs. Nurses may focus on quality of care metrics. Admin staff may track wait times or satisfaction scores. All of these efforts feed into a common strategic outcome: better patient health and experience. So the key takeaway from this discussion: the balanced scorecard is not just a reporting tool. It is a strategic, I would say, it is a strategic execution framework or an implementation framework. It guides action, it aligns teams, and it helps leaders make better decisions about what to monitor and improve. As you plan or implement change in your own organization, take a look how you can use this framework to maintain focus, track progress, and steer efforts towards the long-term success. Now let's talk about or take a closer look at some of the other practical tools that help leaders to track progress and course correct. So balanced scorecard we discussed earlier. It's a powerful tool because it can translate strategic vision into measurable action. To put in a different way, balanced scorecard might be like a dashboard in the car. It tells you how you are driving across multiple dimensions, not just your speed. It tracks the fuel consumption. It tracks the temperature. It tracks your satisfaction, making sure that it is playing the music or the entertainment of your choice. It gives you capabilities to adjust many things in the car so that your ride is as smooth as possible. When we come to a hospital setting, balanced scorecard will give us financial setting. Are we tracking against the budget? How is the patient satisfaction scores are? How are the discharge times reflecting the processes? Learning. So financial, customer, internal processes, learning, all of those becomes part and parcel of the journey. So the tools also help acting as the link between happy employees, happy customers, higher profits. And then it brings a shared purpose. It's very similar to the balanced scorecard discussions because this helps to build a unified roadmap where everybody understands their role and they can all row their boat towards the bigger vision as established by the organization. So one of the most common ways to assess how people are adapting is through surveys and behavior tracking. Surveys will capture attitudes, emotions, and concerns, which would reveal resistance, confusion, or buy-in. But equally important is behavior. Are people attending new training sessions? Are teams adopting the new processes or reverting to the old habits? So metrics like system login data, attendance, compliance rates, timesheets, or even hallway chatter can help paint the full picture. So after a hospital launched a new digital discharge tool, leadership didn't just rely on the formal feedback. They observed which departments adopted the tool and how frequently it was used. And those insights reveal significant gaps between perceived and the actual engagement. So the change management indicator, it's a very structured tool. You can consider that as a readiness check. It allows organization to assess where people stand in their change journey. Are they aware of the change? Do they understand it? Do they believe it? So CMI can be deployed as a survey or as a facilitated session, and it helps leaders identify which groups need more support and where the real friction lies. Lastly, the assessments are just not about collecting data. They're about starting a dialogue, starting a conversation. So by visualizing feedback across departments, functions, or even geographic units, you can identify localized issues. Maybe one clinic feels uninformed. Maybe another unit is excited, but it lacks the resources to act. And the real value lies in using this insight to engage in a meaningful dialogue, clarify misunderstanding, and build tailored intervention that truly move people forward. So in summary, tracking how people are responding allows us to be proactive, not reactive. Through surveys, tools like the CMI, and open dialogue, we ensure that people are not just going through the motions, but are actually on the journey with us. Because in change, people aren't the problem. They are pathway to success. So that completes the video lecture for module 6. I strongly encourage you to watch the video. In fact, this video even brought many learning key points in my professional career. I always thought that the more rewards motivated employees, even though personally I've seen myself that more rewards may not be fully aligned with my motivation, rather an opportunity where I can showcase, learn, and fulfill the thirst for innovation. So it's very interesting. You should all watch the video and learn from the different aspects, how motivating employees will work in different settings. And then we have the discussion question this week. Discuss the primary performance management model used by your organization. Very interesting. In fact, I would encourage everybody to read other people's responses, because you would see a plethora of different performance management models utilized by companies in different industries and different settings. You can take a look at the soft or hard model in managing people. What kind of motivators are they using? And how effective are those performance management model in bringing the high performance? From an assignment perspective, completing the exercise 22.1, identifying how a big bang disruption can affect a person's assumptive world. It's documented in the page 225 of the textbook. As always, submit your assignment as 600-word minimum with academic references. I can clearly see the quality of discussion question responses and the assignment have steeply increased with academic references and the promptness in completing based on the timeline. So Thursday, end of day, is your discussion question response. Friday and Saturday, you can respond to the peers. Sunday is the due date for the assignment. So thank you. Have a great week, and I will see all of you in the class.